Hey, lady. Hey, how are you? I'm all right. How are you? Good. It's hard to believe it's coming to an end. I know. You're the best. Yes. Awesome. I'm so proud. I don't know if you're exactly.
Purposeful coding, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean? But then I was like, oh, it makes it sound like starting to do
Actually, one of the projects we'll talk about is the ones the poem.
crazy. Yeah.
Alright, so we have a couple minutes before we get started, like 3 minutes. But I do have a collaborate board up here. I want you to show me, like, give me memes. I use memes all the time, and I'm not going to stand near that microphone because I can't stand still because I'm, like, way too much of a moving person. But no one should have trouble hearing me. Believe me, everyone who works in my building will tell you that no one should have trouble hearing me. So go ahead and show me a meme because, like, kids love to answer with memes, and so do I. What does it look like when a kid succeeds in your class? You have that project, someone hands you something beautiful, you're like, why are you hiding your light? What does it look like when that kid succeeds, when you tell them, oh my God, your project was awesome? All right, so for those of you who just came in, we are going to get started. If you are not in the Nearpod yet, the code is H, J as in joy, T as in Tom, W as in winning, and F as in fun. All right, so what it looks like when a student succeeds. Every single one of us has seen this face when some kid, you gave them a project, it was something super hard, and it's that kid who you never expected it, and you go up to them and you're like, oh my God, your project was so good. And that face that a kid makes when you're like, not that honors kid, right? That honors kid hears that all the time, that there's that like one kid who they're like, yeah, I know. I'm talking about that kid who like barely ever does their projects, like maybe hasn't handed in anything all year, and you gave them that assignment, and for some reason this assignment clicked. And you get to go up to that kid the next day and you're like, so I was grading last night, and I do a lot of blind grading, so I like don't have their names in front of me, and I look at this one and I'm like, oh my God, this is so super good. And then you look at that kid's name and you're like, what? Oh, I'm so excited. Right? We've seen that face when you go up to a kid and you're like, I love the work that you did. So today I want to talk about how do we create projects where we get more and more of those faces. Because I want to see every kid in my class having this super excited, I succeeded, and I did something really academically challenging. All right, so we know that planning is a huge part of having these things succeed. So I just want you to tell me, if you can, post one assignment that you did that you saw a ton of those happy, shining, I succeeded faces, right? And an assignment where you were like, I thought this was gonna be awesome. And then I got the work and I had to rethink my entire grading because obviously I messed up somewhere. And if you're thinking you don't have one of those assignments, I would like to talk to you, because I know that I have plenty of those assignments where it's like, I thought this was going to be so cool, and I thought I explained it really well, and then I saw what got turned in. Ooh, federalism superheroes. I want to hear about it.
Three superheroes, one doing the middle sheer power superhero, then they do a federal superhero and a state superhero power, and then a superhero, and then the powers that they have are that power with that. So
Very
their
cool.
power like coin money, and they have like throwing money or something.
Do they draw, or do they?
Draw it, and then they give them the powers, and then they get to have that.
Do they have to draw? Because that like.
I like them draw, but they can also, I tell them that they can like kind of
Okay.
copy paste.
Because I have a friend who told me that everybody can draw and then changed his mind once he met me. I cannot draw. That is not.
So there were people that printed out a bunch of images and then pasted that.
Very cool. All right, that's awesome. All right. Yes.
Just for reference, if you've not used Nearpod before, just you can click that little piece of paper on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can then take notes while we're going, and it will see you. You might want to show how.
Yes. I do not have it up here because this is from the teacher account, so I'm not logged in. But you will see right here up on the right-hand side a little like pencil and paper. Just click on it. It'll give you 3 options to save them. You can type notes on whatever side. And it will give you a copy of the slides. They will get saved to you. So there's a QR code at the end and my contact information. And all of that will go directly to either your email or your inbox wherever you save it. Thank you for reminding me, Emily. I said it a couple minutes ago, but some more people have come in since then. So if you have not done that, go ahead and do that. All right, but let's see. New Deal in Pennsylvania. Oh, yeah. Kids don't always love the New Deal. So let's take a look at some of these things that didn't work, though, right? So what do we see that these things might have in common? All right, so we have a bunch of different projects here, and they're kind of all over the place. But we know that like sometimes we plan things, then we screw up, and then we have to change how we're assessing, because obviously what we thought was assessing the learning isn't. So let's take, or the learning isn't happening. So let's take a look at how we can sort of plan better to make these assessments so that we get all those good things going on. So, just a little agenda for today. We're going to talk about what exactly is authentic assessment. We're going to look at how to backwards plan if we have not done that. We're going to look at how to plan these learning experiences, making some modern connections, the importance of reflection in authentic assessments. Because sometimes my assessment is not what you turned into me. My assessment is tell me about your learning process, and that's my assessment of how you learned. And then just a quick wrap up. All right, so if we're looking at it, what is authentic assessment? And I apologize, I lost my clicker 2 days ago. Have a little game here for those of you who are in. This is a little time to climb. We're going to look at authentic assessments. And I just want to say that, so the School District of Philadelphia asked me to create this presentation, but all of the assessments that I have written in here are all things that I have seen teachers do. Including people who are in higher roles in schools, we know that. And we're gonna do just a little game. All right, let's see. Choose your character, guys. There's more characters if you can. All right, so we got a bunch of people in here, so let's take a look. All right, you have 15 seconds per thing to tell me if it is an authentic assessment. Hopefully our internet works well enough for this. All right, put events in chronological order and write a one-sentence description. This is an assignment that I saw this year from my department. Perspective-taking debate on abolition strategies. A talk show interviewing historical characters. If you're doing that one, you better be able to tell me why you need to do a talk show, where are the questions coming from, what's going on. Sometimes it's just an excuse for kids to get up there and pretend. All right, asking students to determine the reliability of a primary source. By the way, Carol is in the loop right now. Carol. Ooh, Rachel. Rachel thinks. All right, asking them to determine the primary source is a multiple choice test. No, you're assessing whether to give them the book. An awkward conversation. Is that an authentic assessment? Listen, it's the most authentic assessment you can have. Right? You have to actually drive the car. Reciting the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. Right? Memorize this and then. Right. get it back? Absolutely not. Okay, I love it too. Not gonna, like, this is very similar. It's not your unit. Again, I love it too, but it's forward assessment. Or maybe, depends on your budget. Yes, question 10 out of 10. And Rachel is in the lead. All right, Rachel wins. With Katie and Katie right behind her. So Rachel, see me at the end. I have a prize. Because everybody loves games and prizes. Like that's not like it. All right. But so authentic assessment. What is it? What does it look like? Right? We looked at all these things and like, okay, I can give you a multiple choice test or whatever. I haven't given a test at all this year, by the way. Not one. My kids are freaking out. They do not know how to handle it. I have decided that there are no more tests in social studies, and they're like, but I'm used to memorizing things and putting them on the paper, and that's how I get A's, and why am I failing your class? And I'm like, because I actually expect you to understand it, not just repeat it back to me. So what is authentic assessment? Is it real world relevant? Our on-road driver's test. You're gonna have to actually do those things. If it doesn't have relevance to the real world, why are you doing it? I walked into a colleague's classroom the one day and there was a blanket hanging from the ceiling. I said, what? What's that? I asked one of his students, why is there a blanket hanging from the middle of his room? And my student goes, well, we're making puppet shows. I said, why? He said, I don't know. So I asked the teacher, I said, why are they making puppet shows? He's like, well, they're demonstrating understanding. I'm like, of how to make puppets? I don't, like you're spending valuable class time on making puppets, unless you're assessing them on their ability to make puppets, but this is like 12th grade civics. So I don't think you're assessing them on how to make puppets. So why are you spending time on that? Where is the real world relevance to your puppet show? My assessment is comprised of complex tasks that can be completed by students over a sustained period of time. An authentic assessment is not a test where you sit down and then you write your answers, right? This should be something that you're building that learning throughout. Students are provided the opportunity to look at multiple perspectives and a variety of resources. You should never have one resource, it should be many. My assessments include opportunity for reflection and self-evaluation. Unless a student can think about the learning that they have done, they are not fully learning. If they're not thinking about what did I do well, what did I not do well, and how can I be better in the future, they're not getting the most out of what they're learning. Assessment skills can be applied across multiple disciplines. Learning does not exist in buckets, and this is a thing that I say to my students all the time. Right? Just because I'm a social studies teacher does not mean that what goes on in English class or math class or science class does not apply to my classroom. And I say that because a lot of people will agree about the English, and then I'll tell kids, okay, today things are gonna get sciencey up in here. And they're like, what? And I'm like, today we're doing math. And they're like, I don't understand, I thought this was social studies. I'm like, learning doesn't exist in buckets, guys, roll with it. So assessment creates polished and completed products, right? There is a final goal, a thing that they're going to make at the end that you can then hold up and be like, oh my God, look at what my students did. Look at how amazing they are. If you've seen my Twitter, you'll see there's lots of those things. And allows for multiple solutions and diverse outcomes. It is perfectly acceptable to say you might turn in something written or something artistic or something that is completely different from everyone else who I've ever seen do this project, as long as it's assessing the, as long as you're showing me that you've met the learning objectives and that you have understood this fully. Yeah, give me something that is completely your own. I should not have, when I get a project at the end of a unit, I should not have 90 copies of the same project. If I do, then I did something wrong, not the kids. All right. So, how many of you guys use UBD, that sort of backwards planning thing? All right. So, I originally did this for the school district of Philadelphia, so there were a lot of people who were like, I don't know what that is. It's okay if you don't. Just go ahead, quickly answer the poll question if you can. I don't expect everyone to have done this. It's not necessarily what we're used to doing. So, take 5 more seconds. I got a lot of you answering. Ooh, there we go, almost everybody. All right. So, most of us have tried it, or we try to use it most of the time. If this is the first you've ever heard of it, that's cool. I'm going to give you some tools, and you're going to go home and you're going to be like, oh my God, why haven't I been doing this whole time? Because it does, in fact, make your life better. But what are just, and I don't have this in here, what are some of the barriers to us doing this all the time? Because we can see, most of us, like, we've done it a few times, or we try to use it most of the time. What are the barriers to us doing this? And you can just, shout out your answers. It's top heavy. There's a lot of planning to begin with. Right? What else?
Common planning.
Common planning. All right, if you have someone else who teaches the same subject as you and they're not on board with this, well, then you have a problem. What else? Somebody? All right.
When you're forced to use the same assessment and you don't have the assessment at the end.
What do you mean?
Like, with backwards design, you're supposed to teach at the end of design.
Yeah.
And when you don't have the end.
Oh yeah, if you don't know where you're going, you can't do this. Right? You have to know where you're going and what you want them to do at the end of your unit. It's the hardest thing, right? It's like, well, what am I going to have them do? Like, how am I going to make sure they did this? So that's actually a lot of what I'm talking about today. So, all right, we're just going to skip that. So for the backwards planning framework, right, we start with, what do I want them to do? I have to know my outcome. I have to know what that end product is. Well, I have to know what I want them to know, not what the end product is, but I have to know what I want them to know at the end, right? And then I have to figure out, well, what's acceptable evidence that they've learned that, right? What's my assessment going to be at the end? And then I have to plan out, like, okay, how much time am I going to take to teach this, and how am I going to teach it? And then I have to do it, and then I have to reflect, and I have to have the kids reflect. So it's a process, but once you get used to it, it's not so bad. But so when we talk about identifying these learning outcomes in social studies, we have to think about it in really, really novel ways, because we are not worried about memorization of dates, right? That's not, I don't care. You have a Google machine in front of you 98% of the time, unless I have taken it away because you keep pulling out your phone during class. I don't need you to memorize dates. I need you to understand how things connect and have like a general idea of the timeline of history, be able to make connections and engage in historical thinking skills. So, I'm going to start with 3 learning outcomes. Right? What's the big idea I want to get at? What skills do I want them to learn during this unit, because I am teaching skills as well, and what knowledge do I want them to have, right? So if I look, and this is from a whole sheet that you'll see the rest of that I have, I'm starting with like my big idea, right? This is where that sort of, I don't know, they call it all kinds of different things. It might be your theme, it might be your essential question, whatever you want to call it, this is your big idea. What's the big idea? How does this relate to everything else? And then I'm going to think about, okay, well, what's my historical topic? Right now, I am teaching Reconstruction. So if I'm teaching Reconstruction, my historical topic is going to be the failure of Reconstruction, right? But what do I want students to be able to know about history? What are my historical thinking skills that I want to teach in this unit? Because teaching the content and teaching the skills are different. And how am I going to teach the skills? Right? What are the skills that I'm looking at? Am I having them analyze primary source documents? Am I having them look at different perspectives? This is that sort of disciplinary literacy, and this is what gets forgotten a lot of the time when we're thinking about it. What are the historical thinking skills that I'm going to use during this unit that I'm then going to assess in my final assessment? All right? I need to think, what is the modern connection for this topic? I'm teaching Reconstruction. Well, I'm going to talk about political divides in America right now, right? There's always a modern connection. There's always some way to make this relevant to our kids. And if you don't, they're done. You have failed already. Because they see no point in what they are doing unless you have made this modern connection and have made it abundantly clear to them. All right? You can have it in your head, and if you don't make it abundantly clear to them, they're not going to see it. You have to build that in. And then I'm going to worry about, like, okay, how am I going to assess this and what's my grading scheme? But I have to figure out all of these things before I even look at what my project is going to be. Because if I don't know these things, I don't know what I need to assess. All right? We'll just talk about it. Think about something that you planned and fill in the top 4. Like, don't worry about the assessment ideas or the grading scheme. We're not doing that. But I just want you to think about, like, what's a big idea? What's a historical topic? What are some historical thinking skills that I wanted to build into that? And these should be cross-curricular skills. Like close reading. So for me, big idea. How do political divides and political machinations affect the country? Historical topic, Reconstruction and the failure of Reconstruction. Historical thinking skills. I don't remember which ones are in this unit, sorry. It's been a couple days. So this whole planner will be there, but at the end, I actually have some resources that are really good for teaching some of these things. The Choices program from Brown University is really awesome. Stanford History Education Group, and all of that, there are links in the slides here, and they'll be given to you. Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. There's lots of stuff out there. You don't have to do this all on your own. I work in a content area where there are sort of less resources for some of what I do because I teach African American history. So it's not straight US history. Things have to come from a slightly different perspective, and also there's just a lot of really bad stuff when it comes to that. And so I make a lot of my materials, but if you are a US or world history teacher or whatever, like there are so many things out there to help you at least have a starting point or to get ideas, right? You still are going to have to do all of this planning, but you don't have to think up completely new things by yourself. There are resources out there to help you. All right, so I have some people who are here writing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pick on the one person who I see has
up there.
Katie Devlin, can you just hit submit on your? Oh, you deleted it.
Well, it's an old one because
It's okay.
I used to do a previous history like 4 or 5 years ago, and one of my favorite projects that I did was a Twitter page for Andrew Jackson.
Okay.
Because I called it making how many years history. That is an understatement. But I was kind of going through that and racking my brain. Historical thinking skills with like summarization, evaluation, modern connection to the topic, and Alzheimer's in the presidency. What happened in 2016?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time that I might have been like, ooh, a Twitter page. How is that relevant to the presidency? But now we have Twitter as official presidential record. So there's definitely.
Yeah. And then what else is on there? Because that's where I kind of get my stuff done.
Okay.
Authentic assessment ideas. I happened to do a Twitter page just like via Google Slides. Back then, they had some really interesting hashtags, like especially for Trail of Tears. So I thought it was really cool because the creativity that came from it, I didn't see in a lot of my other stuff. I no longer teach in history, unfortunately. But that was something that I really enjoyed from there. What else do I need to say?
No, you're golden. I just wanted to sort of get some ideas because like I'm so in my own little topic world, right? Like I live in my bubble of I teach what I teach, and sometimes other people are like, hey, not everybody teaches what you teach. Like they don't understand what you're talking about all the time. So like slow your roll. And so it's just always good to have different ideas because we are using these tools already in our classroom. We already have that essential question going on. We already have that, okay, what's my historical topic? Like what am I teaching about? But it's a matter of thinking about them and planning appropriately with them. So, you submitted, Emily. Thank you. There you are. All right. So, how do the ancient Olympics compare to the modern Olympics? Thank you, Emily. So they're using compare and contrast. What are your students going to be able to understand for that one, though? What's their historical knowledge that they need?
It literally just popped up for me as my answer.
Oh.
So we filled out a blank Venn diagram of comparing and contrasting modern Olympics to the ancient Olympics. So we actually did the modern Olympics side first, because that was a lot easier for them to grasp. Because many of the things about modern Olympics, we talked about how they're every 4 years on that rotating cycle, so even though it feels like it's every 2.
Yeah.
So we have the Summer Olympics, the Modern Olympics, we talked about what sports they have in each and how they compete cities and the whole nine yards. So then we started talking about the ancient Olympics, and we hit that history standard of continuity and change and how have the Olympics changed over time.
Okay.
And then we write about it.
So my only question for that, for like authentic assessment, is how do their Venn diagrams differ?
Not a ton, because there's only so many things.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about authentic assessment, right? So like that's good for like we're gaining content knowledge, but then like what are they going to do with that knowledge?
Right, and that was so my whole struggle with this is my school, where like that's something that I'm required to do.
Okay.
And I have to give the whole testament, like, I don't have freedom in my assessments.
Okay. We're going to talk about this later, because that's a whole other thing. We're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
You and I are going to connect on that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no.
But
I gave you something to help you.
Yes, you did. Because what I'm going to say about this is, like, this big idea isn't a big idea.
Right, and it was a small thing in my ancient Greece unit is bigger. I was trying to pull something out of it. I brain dead.
So from this, we're actually thinking about like from that unit planning perspective, right? We should be planning the whole unit to begin with. Like that's what do I want them to be able to know and do at the end of the unit? So I should have 6 or 7 historical thinking skills that I'm going to be addressing over that time. What I'm looking at here is it a new skill? Right, so I'm just gonna flip to the next thing here because I do want to talk about this. You should see a thing pop up here to be shared with you. This is that whole planner here, and if you want to make a copy of this for yourself, you can go ahead and do that. This I made as a way to sort of jot out my ideas, and this is what I do. And what we're going to be going to next is the learning plan, because I'm going to think about that big assessment and I'm going to come up with something that they're doing, and then I have to plan, okay, how the heck are we going to get there? Because I now know what I want them to be able to do and what I want them to know, and your authentic assessment, whatever it comes up with, right, that should be a unit assessment. So I'm thinking about, like, what are all the things? So I might come up with an idea there as like a start, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to have them write, just to use an example of mine, I'm going to have them write their own chapter of a textbook, right? Their own textbook chapter, because once we have them in our room, we're no good, so we'll just write our own. And then how am I going to get them there, and what are the steps that we're going to take, and what are those skills that I'm addressing? Because I filled out that top part with my vague idea, but that doesn't mean that I don't go back and revisit it as I make my learning plan. Right? This is a document that talks to itself. So I start thinking out my learning plan, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually working on this skill there. I better go back up and put that at the top so that I make sure that I can put that skill into my final assessment. All right, so go ahead and make a copy. If you do not make a copy right now, there is a link to this in the Google Drive that is linked in these slides. But so we need to plan these learning experiences, right? So we have to figure out where they are. We have to identify those skills and tools that we're going to be using. Skills and tools are different. And we have to come up with some success criteria. So this is where we use data, that dreaded word, right? Oh, we hate it. For those of you who are social studies teachers who don't recognize this, this is Common Lit. It has wonderful primary source documents with keystone aligned questions. Is it perfect? No, but it is 100% free and gives you data and makes them answer those kinds of questions that they're going to have on the Keystone exam. Data is not for that final assessment though. Data is not assessment. Data is planning tool. All right, so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, all right, I gotta figure out my starting point for my 6th period African American history class. Well, what is standard 8? Anybody know what standard 8 is? Structure. My kids always suck at structure. And so I'm looking at reading informational 910.8. All right, I want to build that into this unit. So I'm going to have to plan some activities that are around teaching that skill. Whether or not you agree with the high effect size thing, it's just a list of tools, right? So whether or not you agree with visible learning or not, and the methodology of the high effect size learning strategy, I see some faces. It's okay. Whether or not you agree with the methodology, there are a lot of things here to take away because we know what works. We are teachers. In general, we have master's degrees in this. We are professionals. We know the strategies that work. By the way, a strategy and a tool, they're different. All right, so what tools am I going to use to implement that strategy? I am talking to you guys today in Nearpod today. Nearpod is a tool. Is Nearpod the strategy? No. Nearpod is the tool that I'm using to get it to you. So think really carefully about those tools. Don't try to use too many tools at one time. I know we are at the EdTech conference, and I am saying, like, the dirty thing of, like, don't just use technology for the sake of using technology. Use it because it fits what you are trying to teach. I'm not going to use 12 different tools in the same unit because every time I use a new tool, I have to take instructional time to teach them to use that tool. Pick a couple. Stick with them for a bit. See if they work. If they don't, you can switch them out for something else. But don't just have like a different tool every day for the sake of having a different tool every day. I know you have probably learned about some amazing things while you've been here this week, and I have too, and there's things that I'm super excited to maybe try at some point in the future, but I don't want to just throw them at kids because every single time I use a new tool, I have to take instructional time to teach them to use the tool so that I can use it to implement the education. You want to measure their learning, not their ability to use a tool. So, you know, I might use a jigsaw. I might use direct instruction. It's, you know, it's fine. We're here. It's okay. I might use discussion strategies. I might do all kinds of different things. What's the tool that's appropriate for what I'm doing that's going to help me do that as an educator, not what's fun to play with? And success criteria, which yes is again from visible learning, whether or not you agree with it. It's methodology is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is success criteria is one of those things that actually changed the way that I teach. So we have our learning objective, and we are told in graduate school that our learning objective should be students will be able to do this in order to do that. And do you know what happens when I hand that to a 10th grade student? Glazed eyes. Right? They don't know what that means. Evaluate a primary source document in order to determine what? No. They want success criteria. They want to know what it looks like when they succeed. I asked you what it looks like when a student succeeds, and we all know that face. They want to know what it looks like on the page when they succeed. And this is not, this is what your project should look like. These are the things that I need to see in your project addressed. All right, so the objectives say what we want the students to do. Success criteria is actually telling the kids, this is what it looks like when you do that. Because one of the biggest things is kids will come up and they'll say, am I doing it right? And if you're doing authentic assessment and every kid can hand you a novel different thing than the other kids, that's a hard thing for them to handle. They come up and they'll say, I decided to write a poem for my project. Can you tell me if I'm doing it right? Are you addressing the prompt? Are you spending time on it? Are you thinking? Those are my success criteria. If you can tell me how it addresses the prompt and why you chose to do that and why that was the appropriate response to the prompt, you are meeting the success criteria. I don't care what your poem says. I care that you put the thought into it and can explain to me how it responds to the prompt that you were given. Those are your success criteria. My objective doesn't say it that way. It says students will be able to respond to a grade level appropriate prompt in order to demonstrate understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement and the work of Rudine Sims Bishop. To a kid, what are they going to respond to? What are they going to be able to do? I can give them that learning objective that was on my lesson plans that had to be written in the way that the district wanted me to write my lesson plan. Or I can tell them, can you explain to me how it responds to the prompt? Can you show me where it responds to the prompt? Can you explain your thinking process? Those are my success criteria. All right, so these will help students to stay focused on a given task, right? You come in, what success criteria are you working on today? Determine exactly what they need to know and do. Identify where they are in their learning. Right? When I have students working on projects, they come in, I have a timeline that I will give them generally as far as like, this is where I recommend you be each day, but I'm not going to hold your hand. You're in high school. Get it done. I conference with students every single day while they are doing projects, which means I have kids sign up. They are working. They come in. The first thing they do is they tell me, what are you working on today? How are you meeting the learning criteria that are there? Here are your success criteria. And then at the end of the period, they tell me what they worked on, whether or not they met the success criteria. They are reflecting every single day on that work. right? Reflection solidifies learning. So, that modern connection piece, right? This is what we're going to with, like, sometimes it's really hard to make that modern connection. Sometimes we sit there and we're like, I don't know, because we get bogged down in the content. We get so focused on sort of the minute pieces of it that sometimes making it real and relevant, and also what's real and relevant to us may not be real and relevant to a child sitting in your classroom. You have different life experiences. Sometimes you have to put yourself in their shoes. Sometimes you have to ask someone else for help. I know that I go to trainings all the time and I'm like, hey, give me different ideas. You do not exist in a vacuum. Ask other people. So, why are modern connections an important part of authentic assessment? Why do we need to make those modern connections? You see something that somebody else said and you really like it, go ahead and give them a like. It's just like social media. By the way, I use this with my students and I have kids who have given themselves hashtags because it's anonymous. So it'll be like, hashtag Kier. I'm like, take Kier, really? You need to put a hashtag so your friends can like your answer? It's like, yeah, all right. Right? We are answering the, why am I doing this? How many of you guys have had a kid walk into your classroom and be like, why do we need to learn this? It happened so long ago. It doesn't matter. This is boring. Right? That's why modern connections matter, for this is boring. Because if you give good assessments, you will get work from students where you're like, I haven't ever seen you work like this. And they come in and other teachers will be like, how did you get them to, they haven't turned in a single thing for me all year. How did you get them to do this project? And I'm like, I gave them something real. And I gave them choice. And I let them connect it to who they are and what they love. And if I do that, then I get this. Then I get that deeper understanding. I get that engagement. I get that applicability. You guys are great. And especially today, like, as social studies teachers, there's a lot going on politically that our kids care about. I've seen increased political engagement from a lot of my students over the past few years. I don't know if you are seeing the same thing. But in prior years, having students watch the debates would not be a thing that happened. And now I have kids who are coming in and they want to talk about it. And they have questions and they want to understand the political process in a way that I haven't seen kids engaged in quite some time. And I don't know if that's just a Philly thing or if that's going on everywhere, but that is what I'm seeing in my school. And so these modern connections, especially like if you're teaching civics right now, there's so much to talk about. All right. So we're going to look at planning the themes and essential questions, right? Like this is that big idea. The big idea tells us what the modern connection is. Because if the big idea is freedom, my essential question, my thing that I want them to be able to think about is, what does it mean to be free and how can freedom be achieved? There's our modern connection right there. My essential question should cover the historical topic that I'm covering and what I'm talking about today. So the historical case study would be the Reconstruction era and the Reconstruction Amendments and how the definition of freedom changed at that time. And the modern connection would be the legacy of the Reconstruction Amendments and how the definition of freedom differs from the Reconstruction era. I'm talking about mass incarceration in this unit. I teach in Philadelphia. That's a really relevant thing to a lot of my students. They care about that. We talk about the 13th Amendment and how it says except that slavery is illegal except as punishment for a crime. Right? That's a modern connection. All right, so for revolutions, what is a revolution? Right, historical case studies, you would look at the French and the Haitian revolutions. Modern case study, I don't know, pick somewhere.
Syria?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we can look at so much going on in the world today, and we need to have our students watching the news and thinking about what's happening in the world outside of just where they live. So if we want to pick a place like Syria, you may have students who have family in the Middle East somewhere, or have relatives, or are from there themselves. You may have students who are looking at it and saying, I don't understand what the big deal is, because they just don't see the relevance of watching the news. Or, if you're like me, they go on Instagram and then they see something that someone just like made a picture and posted something on Instagram that has no relevance to actual historical fact, and then they come in and they say, Ms. Stefanovich, Martin Luther King actually survived being shot and was smothered to death in the hospital by his doctor. And I'm like, what? Anybody else have that one this year? Because that was super fun. So we have to fight this misinformation, right? Like, this is such a huge thing. So with revolutions, we're looking at modern day revolutions, but I also talk about misinformation and propaganda in this unit. So those modern connections there, right? So what political, social, and economic factors spark revolutions? And how do people continue to struggle for freedom? Those are big questions that can be looked at in our modern and our historical, right? So our essential question should help lead us to our modern connection. All right, so reflection. Does anybody have kids do reflections whenever they do a project? Yeah. All right, anybody ever, see, it's my favorite part of projects, is reading their reflections. I almost spend more time reading their reflections than I do reading their actual projects. Because I don't care if every single fact is perfect in their project. I want to look at how they thought about what they were doing. All right? So if I look, so here are some examples of student reflections. In conclusion, I learned a lot from this discussion. Mostly that you have to evaluate arguments rather than just going with the one that has the most reasons. I also realized that a lot of arguments are short-term plan versus a long-term plan. But most importantly, I learned that a discussion is more fun when you actually participate in it and share your view. Anybody else's heart just like grow 3 sizes? Come on, like that's great. It doesn't matter if you have more arguments on your side, it matters whether you have better arguments. Oh, look at that. All right, and it's better to participate in the discussion. The flow to me was good, but the main thing that I felt was missing was more conflict. Now that may be a negative thing to want, but in a whole group discussion, I feel like it needs that to be whole. We can't have a discussion unless there's conflict. People can't just say yes and then move on. We can't have a discussion when everyone is agreeing with each other, which is why it called that. Otherwise, we would just do it. But overall, the flow is good. I feel like when it came to opinion, I was the devil's advocate. Maybe just because of what I brought new understandings. Right? It's okay to play devil's advocate. Bring up the questions. I did achieve my goal in this conversation. I was able to make a pretty good contribution overall. And my preparation beforehand went well. The class talks helped the most. It was the most helpful because I was able to remember class skills and use them in conversation. Oh my God, don't make it a mystery that you're teaching them skills. Tell them the skill that you're teaching them. All right? I do think that I perform best when I am actually in the conversation and I have to debate what others say. I do my best when I'm disagreeing with somebody. Overall, in my historical writing, I am proud of working really hard this quarter and earning a B, because the past quarters I have been constantly getting C's, but now I worked hard and I proved to myself that I can do anything if I put my mind to it. At the beginning of this quarter, my goals were to take better notes, participate more, and get a better grade. Reflection doesn't just have to be on the project. What have you done over the past quarter? What are you going to do? What are you going to change? How are you going to get a better grade? Have them set goals. All right, so part of my planning process, right? So I did those learning objectives. I planned out what am I going to do each day to get them to the thing where they're going to do the big activity, which those were from class discussions or debates. And how will students know that they've achieved the goal? I gave them success criteria. I gave them a rubric at the beginning, generally. But what is the evaluation criteria? How are students going to know whether or not they've met it? If they know those success criteria, they should be able to tell you if they have met it. How are students going to assess their own learning? That's that reflection piece. How did I do? What do I need to do better next time? What did I like about doing this project? What was I most proud of? What would I spend more time on if I had this project to do again? And then it's important for kids to reflect, but it's also important for us to reflect. How am I going to evaluate what I have done? What am I going to do at the end to reassess my own unit and whether or not this is working and to make changes if I need to? How am I going to know if I need to make changes? Right? That is the last part of my sort of unit plan. Right. Just some overall things on reflection. Right? Reflection helps cement learning. And gives students the opportunity to learn from mistakes. I tell my kids all the time, ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Fail again, fail better, right? Or try again, fail better. So we are sort of failing forward. We are learning from those mistakes. Oh, I got my graded rubric back. Where did I lose points? Why did I lose those points? Because if I just grade them based upon the rubric and then it gets handed back to them and I don't make them look at it, guess what they do? If I don't make them look at it, are they going to look at it? Nope. But if I say, where'd you lose points on the rubric? Why'd you lose them there? What could you have done to not lose those points? A rubric is useless unless the kid looks at it. Right? Reflection is a skill. It can be taught. It can be practiced. We are forced to do this all the time. I have my students write reading reflections, and I have to teach them. A reflection is not a summary. A reflection may include some pieces of summary, but should be about what you were thinking and what you felt while you were reading that thing or listening to that podcast or looking at that piece of art. I'm not asking you to tell me what it was. I know what it was. I told you to look at it. Tell me how you felt when you looked at it. Reflection is a skill. It has to be taught and it has to be practiced, just like anything else. Some of these questions to help students reflect deeply, because if I just say, what was good? Or On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think you should get? I think I should get a 10. Which you're going to get every time. Or you'll get I think I should get an 8, because if I tell you 10, you're going to think that I'm lying. But so, what did I do really well? What did I struggle with? By the way, what did I struggle with is a good question for you to pay attention to, because if you ask all of your students, what did I struggle with, and they all say the same thing, that's on you, not on them. Not that struggle is always bad. It might be that, like, I had trouble putting this idea and this idea together. Well, if that's the point of your assessment, cool. I'm glad that was difficult. What could I have done to do better? If I had to do this project over again, what would I do differently? How did I contribute to a group project? Fun fact. This was originally developed for the School District of Philadelphia, and I had another teacher I was assigned to work on it with. And when we met, she said, I'm about to leave the country for 10 days. Guess who made the presentation? If you have group work going on, reflection's really important because it'll tell you who actually did that work in the group. The kid can't tell you what was hard or what was easy. Guess what? They didn't do anything. Did I contribute fairly? And what connections can you make to today's world? They might come up with a different modern connection than you initially gave them. They might tell you a different perspective that you hadn't thought about when teaching that, because I have kids do that to me all the time, and I love it. All right, so we're going to finish up. We're a little bit early, but I just want to, think about what is one step that you think you might take to think about making your words, brain thoughts, mouth words, not matching up. What is one step you think you might be able to take going home tomorrow to make your assessments more authentic? Maybe. More student reflection. Yeah, it's the easiest thing to add in, right? But it's the piece that we always forget about because you're like, oh no, I have to get to that next content piece. So sometimes it's best to just be like, no, I'm going to take that day and I'm going to say, hey, I want you to really sit down and I want you to tell me what was going through your head while you were doing this. Anything else?
I know for me, one of the things that I struggle with is thinking of education. Because you find so many really good ads in history, and on the other hand, teach history, that you can't think that way sometimes. But to think big picture, and to use that framework to think like, okay, where do I want them to be at the end, and really focus on allowing the creation of whatever you might feel like to summarize that.
Yeah, it can be really scary to be like, make the thing the way that you want it. Because when we release that amount of control, like, you don't know what you're gonna get. But sometimes when you do that, you will see things that you never would have thought to tell them to make. And we are, we're here, we're at Pete. We are obviously people who we like the technology and we like the things and we like the stuff. There's another Nearpod pioneer who talks about it's like, in teaching, there are cliff jumpers and there are toe dippers. Right? If you're here, chances are you're a cliff jumper, which is like, I want to try that new thing. It seems cool. But we're going back to buildings with a lot of toe dippers. I don't know about that. That seems scary. I'm not familiar with that tool. And we have to remember that, like, maybe we need to take some advice from some of those toe dippers. That, like, just because it's a cool new tool doesn't mean that it's the right tool for what we're trying to do. Well, thank you guys for helping out today. Here are just some sort of resources for looking at ways to do some more authentic assessment in the social studies classroom. The Stanford History Education Group has great materials to help you get started. They do a lot of modified sources too, so if you have some students who are struggling readers, they will have the primary source document and then they will have modified documents with vocab terms to help you sort of build some of that understanding. The Choices program from Brown University, anybody use this? Yeah, great stuff, right? Historyskills.com The Google Applied Digital Skills is going to be more how to use those Google tools to do things like write a research paper and building up some of their digital literacy while you're also getting to the social studies content. But it might help you think about some of those, what are authentic projects that I could have them do, right? Because teaching that digital literacy and those digital skills is also a skill, and it's a thing that chances are they're going to need to know how to do in the future. So if you are a Google school, the Google Applied Digital Skills are great. And then if you save this, if you save it through the Nearpod, you'll get an email of this, but you can go ahead and scan that QR code. It'll take you to a folder that has that planning tool in it and also these slides. So if you want to share them with anybody, feel free. Any questions? All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know it's Wednesday and like a lot of people have gone home and you're like, is it lunchtime yet? Oh my God. Some of us have to drive across the state. So I appreciate all of you who are here. Thank you so much. And Katie, come up and get your prize. Oh, was it Rachel? It was Rachel. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it was Rachel. There were two Katies in second and third. That's why I got confused. Yeah. Rachel.
Hi.
So what I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you a KTI star.
Awesome.
Because do you know about KTI?
I do.
Okay. So I'm going to give you one of my KTI stars because I have a couple left. And so, yeah. So you're building curriculum?
I am, well, I'm an instructional coach.
Okay.
I'm a media specialist and instructional coach. And so I'm working